In 1991, 9 factory workers began their night shift at Meridian Chemical Plant in Ohio. The machines kept running, the production line never stopped, but by morning the workers had vanished without a trace. Security cameras showed them entering the building. They never showed them leaving. For 33 years, the truth was buried beneath layers of corporate cover-ups and government silence. Until last month, when the factory's demolition uncovered something that explains why some disappearances were never meant to be solved. Welcome to Lost Mystery Stories. Before we expose what really happened to the workers who vanished from the night shift, tell me in the comments, have you ever felt like your workplace was hiding something darker than you could imagine? And if you believe that some corporations value profit over human life, hit that subscribe button because this story will reveal the deadly price of industrial secrets. October 23, 1991. Meridian Chemical Plant, Akron, Ohio. The Meridian Chemical Plant operated 24 hours a day, producing industrial solvents and pharmaceutical precursors for companies across the Midwest. The night shift was smaller than the day crew, just 9 workers responsible for maintaining production levels while most of the city slept. The missing workers were experienced employees, some with over a decade at the plant. Frank Morrison, 45 floor supervisor, 15 years with the company. Maria Santos, 32 quality control technician, 8 years. Robert Kim, 28 chemical engineer, 3 years. Linda Parker, 38 safety inspector, 12 years. David Reeves, 35 maintenance supervisor, 10 years. Jennifer Walsh, 29 lab technician, 5 years. Tommy Martinez, 41, equipment operator, 14 years. Carol Johnson, 34 environmental monitor, 6 years. Mike Chin, 37, production coordinator, 9 years. They were good people, said Betty Morrison, Frank's widow. Dedicated workers who took pride in their jobs. Frank used to say Meridian was like a second family to him. But in the weeks leading up to their disappearance, several workers had expressed concerns about changes at the plant. New equipment had been installed in Building C, a restricted section that most employees weren't allowed to access. The work required special clearances and involved chemicals that weren't part of Meridian's normal production line. Frank was worried about something, Betty recalled. He'd been asking questions about the new project, trying to understand what they were manufacturing in Building C. His supervisor told him it was classified government contract work and to focus on his own responsibilities. The night shift of October 23 began normally. Security cameras recorded all 9 workers badging in between 10:45 p.m. and 11:15 p.m. The production logs show normal activity throughout the night, machines running, quotas being met, quality checks being performed on schedule. But at 6 a.m. when the day shift arrived, the plant was empty. Day shift supervisor Ronald Hayes arrived at 5:45 a.m. to prepare for the shift transition. The parking lot still contained the night shift workers' cars, and the security system showed no record of anyone leaving the building. I thought maybe they were in the break room or dealing with an equipment issue, Hayes said. But when I walked the floor there was nobody there. Machines were running, lights were on, but no people. The production line was operating normally. Computer terminals showed logged activities from throughout the night. The last entry was made at 5:30 a.m. by Maria Santos, noting that quality tests were within acceptable parameters. But in Building C, the restricted area where the classified project was conducted, Hayes found something disturbing. The normally locked entrance was standing open, and inside, sophisticated equipment was still running, producing a steady hum that seemed to vibrate through the building's foundation. I wasn't supposed to go in there, Hayes admitted. But with 9 people missing, I had to check everywhere. What I saw, it wasn't like any chemical processing I'd ever seen before. Building C contained equipment that didn't match Meridian's normal operations. Sealed chambers, monitoring devices with digital readouts, and what appeared to be medical equipment arranged around a central processing unit. The air smelled different, not like industrial chemicals but metallic and bitter like the taste of blood. Hayes called 911 at 6:17 a.m. Detective Sarah Martinez of the Akron Police Department was the first investigator on scene. What she found defied normal explanation for a missing persons case. 9 people don't just disappear from a locked building, Detective Martinez wrote in her initial report. Especially when security cameras show them entering but never leaving, and their cars are still in the parking lot. The investigation revealed several disturbing facts. Security system anomalies. While cameras showed workers entering the building, footage from midnight to 6 a.m. was corrupted. The security company claimed it was a technical malfunction, but forensic analysis suggested the recordings had been deliberately erased. Production records. Computer logs showed continuous work throughout the night, with quality checks, equipment adjustments, and production notes entered regularly until 5:30 a.m. The timestamps suggested normal activity right up until the workers vanished. Personal belongings. Lockers contained workers' street clothes, lunches, and personal items. Tools were left mid-task as if workers had simply put them down and walked away. Building C access. The restricted area's electronic locks showed no record of being opened during the night shift, despite Hayes finding the door open. The access logs had been wiped from the system. It was like they had been erased, Detective Martinez noted. Not just the people but any trace of what they'd been doing in their final hours. Meridian Chemical's corporate response was immediate and coordinated. Within hours of the police report, company lawyers arrived on scene, federal agents appeared claiming jurisdiction over the classified project in Building C, and media outlets were contacted with prepared statements about a possible industrial accident under investigation. The families were told their loved ones had likely been exposed to dangerous chemicals and had been taken to a secure medical facility for treatment. They would be contacted when it was safe to do so. But days passed, then weeks, with no word from the missing workers. Meridian Chemical Corporation was owned by Apex Industries, a defense contractor with connections to military chemical weapons programs. The classified project in Building C wasn't producing industrial solvents. It was developing experimental compounds for biological warfare research. "We knew the company had government contracts," said former Meridian employee James Walker, who had quit 2 weeks before the disappearance. "But we thought it was standard industrial chemistry. The security clearances, the restricted areas, the non-disclosure agreements, they told us it was to protect trade secrets." Walker had worked closely with the missing night shift crew and had noticed troubling changes in the months before their disappearance. "They were installing equipment that didn't belong in a chemical plant," he said. "Containment chambers, biological monitoring systems, and what looked like medical isolation units. When I asked questions, I was told it was for enhanced safety protocols related to the new government contract." The project, code-named Blackwater Protocol, involved testing experimental nerve agents and biological compounds that could be deployed as crowd control weapons. The work required human testing to determine safe exposure levels and antidote effectiveness. "They weren't just manufacturing chemical weapons," Walker revealed. "They were testing them on their own employees." The night shift workers hadn't vanished. They had been deliberately exposed to experimental compounds as part of the testing protocol. When the exposure proved fatal, their bodies were disposed of, and the entire incident was covered up as a disappearance. Meridian's insurance policies paid substantial settlements to the families, but only after they signed comprehensive non-disclosure agreements preventing them from discussing the case publicly or pursuing independent investigations. The FBI's involvement in the Meridian case wasn't to investigate the disappearance. It was to ensure the cover-up remained intact. Special Agent William Cross arrived within hours of the initial police report and immediately classified the entire Building C operation under national security provisions. Local law enforcement was barred from accessing the restricted area, and all evidence related to the classified project was seized by federal agents. Agent Cross made it clear that this was beyond local jurisdiction, Detective Martinez recalled. He said the missing workers were involved in sensitive government work and that their safety required federal oversight of the investigation. The official FBI position was that the 9 workers had been relocated to a secure facility for medical monitoring after potential exposure to classified materials. Their families would be reunited with them once doctors determined it was safe. But Agent Cross's real mission was to sanitize the scene and eliminate any evidence of illegal human experimentation. Building C was completely stripped of equipment within 48 hours. All computer records were confiscated. The specialized containment chambers were dismantled and removed. By the end of the week, the restricted area looked like any other section of the chemical plant. "The federal government wasn't investigating a crime," said civil rights attorney Rebecca Chin, who represented several families in their legal battles with Meridian. "They were covering one up." The cover-up extended beyond the factory. Hospital records were sealed, coroner reports were classified, and witnesses were threatened with prosecution under national security laws if they discussed what they had seen. 3 Meridian employees who attempted to speak publicly about the classified project were arrested on charges of violating the Espionage Act. All 3 later pleaded guilty to lesser charges in exchange for agreeing to permanent silence about their employment at the factory. Despite the legal threats and financial settlements, some families refused to accept the official explanation for their loved one's disappearance. Maria Santos's husband, Carlos, hired private investigators and spent his life savings trying to find his wife. The investigation uncovered disturbing connections between Meridian Chemical and a network of defense contractors conducting illegal human experiments. They told us Maria was in a secure medical facility, Carlos said. But when we demanded to see her, to speak with her doctors, to get medical updates, they claimed patient confidentiality and national security prevented any contact. Carlos's private investigators discovered that Meridian Chemical had been conducting human testing for over 2 years before the night shift disappearance. Previous test subjects had been recruited from homeless populations and undocumented immigrants, people whose disappearances wouldn't attract attention. But the Blackwater protocol required testing on healthy subjects with detailed medical histories and known family connections. The night shift workers were selected not despite their families and community ties, but because of them. They needed subjects whose reactions could be properly monitored and documented, the private investigators' report concluded. People with medical records, employment histories, and family members who could provide detailed information about any changes in behavior or health. The night shift workers had been guinea pigs in a chemical weapons program that required human data to perfect its deadly compounds. When the testing proved fatal, eliminating the evidence became a higher priority than preserving the lives of American workers. In September 2024, Meridian Chemical Plant was finally demolished after sitting abandoned for over a decade. The property had been sold to a development company planning to build a shopping center on the site. Construction foreman Miguel Rodriguez was overseeing the demolition when workers uncovered something that had been hidden beneath Building C for 33 years. We were breaking up the foundation when we hit a concrete slab that wasn't on any of the architectural plans, Rodriguez said. It was a sealed chamber, completely hidden beneath the building. The chamber contained equipment that had been too large or too dangerous to remove during the 1991 cover-up. Industrial-grade incinerators, chemical disposal systems, and what appeared to be a crematorium designed for biological waste. But the most disturbing discovery was a vault containing thousands of documents that detailed the full scope of the human experimentation program at Meridian Chemical. The recovered documents revealed that the Blackwater Protocol had been active from 1989 to 1995, with Meridian Chemical serving as the primary testing facility for experimental biological and chemical weapons. The program tested compounds designed to cause rapid neurological breakdown leading to paralysis and death, hemorrhagic fever symptoms that could be deployed through water supplies, psychoactive agents that caused permanent psychological damage, respiratory toxins that mimicked natural pneumonia outbreaks. The night shift workers of October 23, 1991, had been exposed to a compound designated BW7, designed to test the effectiveness of nerve agents in enclosed industrial environments. The documentation was meticulous, said FBI agent Jennifer Walsh, who investigated the discovered files. They recorded every detail of the exposure: dosage levels, time to onset of symptoms, progression of neurological damage, and time of death. According to the files, all 9 workers died within 6 hours of exposure. Their bodies were cremated in the facility's hidden incinerator, and their remains were disposed of through the plant's chemical waste system. The testing wasn't an accident or malfunction. It was a deliberate human experiment designed to gather data on chemical weapons effectiveness. But the Blackwater Protocol files revealed something even more disturbing. Meridian Chemical wasn't the only facility conducting such experiments. The discovered documents showed that illegal human experimentation was being conducted at industrial facilities across the United States. Between 1985 and 2000, at least 17 chemical plants, pharmaceutical facilities, and defense contractors had participated in programs testing biological and chemical weapons on their own employees. It was a systematic program, Agent Walsh explained. They targeted blue-collar workers at industrial facilities because their deaths could be explained as workplace accidents, chemical exposures, or equipment malfunctions. The network included Apex Industries facilities in Ohio, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Biotech laboratories in North Carolina and Georgia. Chemical plants in Texas, Louisiana, and West Virginia. Defense contractors in California, Arizona, and New Mexico. Each facility followed the same pattern. Workers were selected based on psychological profiles and family situations, exposed to experimental compounds during night shifts when oversight was minimal, and their deaths were covered up through corporate government cooperation. The total number of victims was estimated at over 300 American workers who died in illegal human experiments conducted by their own employers with federal government approval. These weren't rogue operations, Agent Walsh said. They were coordinated programs with oversight from the Department of Defense, the CIA, and the CDC. The entire system was designed to gather weapons data using American citizens as test subjects. When the Blackwater Protocol files were discovered, the same forces that had covered up the original experiments immediately moved to suppress the new evidence. Agent Walsh's investigation was transferred to a classified task force beyond public oversight. The demolition site was declared a federal hazardous materials zone, preventing media access. The construction company was paid to sign non-disclosure agreements and relocate their development project. Within 48 hours, the entire site was sealed and the documents were classified as national security materials, Agent Walsh said. I was told the investigation would continue at a classified level, but I was reassigned to a different division. The families of the original missing workers were contacted by federal agents and informed that new evidence had been found, but that revealing it publicly would compromise ongoing national security operations. Once again, they were offered financial settlements in exchange for continued silence. Most accepted, exhausted by decades of legal battles and empty promises. But Carlos Santos refused. They killed my wife 33 years ago and they're still covering it up, he said. How many more workers have died in these experiments? How many more families are still waiting for answers that will never come? Carlos's attempts to speak publicly about the Blackwater files were met with legal threats, IRS audits, and surveillance that made it clear his continued silence was not optional. The most disturbing revelation in the Blackwater files wasn't the historical record of human experimentation. It was evidence that similar programs were still active. Documents from 2015 to 2020 showed that biological weapons testing had evolved from industrial facilities to other settings. Hospitals, nursing homes, homeless shelters, and immigration detention centers. The methods became more sophisticated, Agent Walsh said before her reassignment. Instead of obvious chemical exposures at factories, they moved to settings where unexplained deaths wouldn't attract attention. Medical facilities where patients die regularly, shelters where homeless people disappear without investigation, detention centers where undocumented immigrants have no legal protections. The modern programs tested pharmaceuticals and biological agents disguised as medical treatments, supplements, or vaccines. Subjects believed they were receiving legitimate medical care while actually being exposed to experimental compounds designed to gather weapons effectiveness data. It never stopped, Carlos Santos concluded. They just became better at hiding it. The corporations involved in the original Blackwater Protocol had evolved into major pharmaceutical companies, defense contractors, and healthcare conglomerates. The federal agencies that had overseen the cover-ups were still actively protecting the programs and suppressing evidence of ongoing experimentation. In November 2024, Carlos Santos was found dead in his home from an apparent heart attack. He was 67 years old with no history of heart disease. His death occurred 3 days before he was scheduled to meet with an investigative journalist about the Blackwater files. The journalist's article about industrial human experimentation was killed by her editor. When she tried to publish it elsewhere, she was sued for possession of classified materials and threatened with prosecution under the Espionage Act. The demolition site where the Blackwater files were discovered was sold to a federal agency and converted into a secure research facility, whose purpose was classified. Public access to the area was permanently restricted. Agent Walsh was transferred to a desk job in Alaska and signed a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement as a condition of keeping her federal employment. The families of the 9 missing Meridian workers received final settlement payments in exchange for agreements never to discuss the case again. Legal documents sealed all records related to the disappearance for 75 years. But the industrial facility where Maria Santos, Frank Morrison, and 7 of their co-workers died in 1991 wasn't the only location where American workers were murdered in chemical weapons experiments. Similar discoveries have been made at demolished facilities across the country. Hidden chambers, crematoriums, and document archives detailing decades of illegal human testing. Most are immediately classified by federal agencies and sealed from public view. Today, the site where Meridian Chemical Plant once stood is an empty lot surrounded by chain-link fencing. Warning signs claim the area is contaminated with industrial chemicals and unsafe for public access. But sometimes, late-shift workers at nearby factories report strange phenomena: the sound of machinery running in the empty lot, shadows moving through the abandoned space, and the smell of chemicals that shouldn't exist in the air. The 9 workers who vanished from the night shift in 1991 were never found because they were never meant to be found. They died as test subjects in a weapons program that treated American workers as expendable resources in the development of tools designed to kill other human beings. Their families were paid to forget, their deaths were classified as national security secrets, and their sacrifice was buried beneath layers of corporate profit and government denial. But the most terrifying truth about the Meridian chemical disappearance isn't that it happened. It's that it's still happening. In industrial facilities across America, workers report mysterious illness outbreaks, unexplained chemical exposures, and colleagues who disappear after asking too many questions about classified projects. The factories look different now, cleaner, more modern, with better safety protocols and oversight systems. But the fundamental equation hasn't changed. American workers are still being used as test subjects for weapons that their own government plans to deploy against other human beings. The night shift at Meridian Chemical ended 33 years ago. But somewhere in America tonight, another shift is beginning, and other workers are being exposed to compounds they don't understand, for purposes they weren't told about, by employers who consider their lives expendable. The machines keep running. The production never stops. And the workers keep disappearing. The end. Subscribe to Lost Mystery Stories for more exposés of corporate cover-ups, government conspiracy, and the industrial programs that treat American workers as expendable test subjects. Because in the world of classified research and defense contracts, some people are considered more valuable than others.